Welcome to our latest edition of Hudson Institute's Deep Dive from Jerusalem and Washington, D.C. Today, we will discuss at length the latest developments throughout the greater Middle East, U.S. foreign policy with regard to this region, the transition from one CENTCOM commander who was known and praised here in Israel as a great friend to another who is no less of a friend, but nonetheless has a lot of challenges to tackle in the next several years. But before we discuss all of the complexities of this region, let's turn to introduce our experts for today. We start, of course, with Dr. Mike Duran, who is the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute, where he's also a senior fellow and formerly, of course, a senior director at the NSC in Washington for the MENA region, namely the Middle East and North Africa. Next to him, Dr. Brigadier General in Reserve Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence at the Mossad Intelligence Agency, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. And last but not least is Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's great to see all three of you. And Dr. Duran, it's great seeing you again. What can you tell us about this transition from one CENTCOM commander to another? Naturally, this is a significant shift, but nonetheless, going from the commander to the deputy commander is less of a shift than some may expect.
So, I assume that first of all, thank you, Jonathan, for having me. Thank you for hosting this. Great to be here. I think that the transition from General Kurilla won't be bumpy at all. I assume that the CENTCOM leadership sees the region pretty homogenously, but it does come at an interesting moment. This war that began on October 7th is an Iran-Israel war, not just a war between Israel and Hamas. I think General Kurilla really understood that this is Iran versus Israel, and his leadership, his close cooperation with the Israelis, the shared strategic picture that he had with the Israelis was one of the factors that helped Prime Minister Netanyahu direct this war in such a way that allowed Israel in the end to get to the head of the octopus, the Iranian octopus. Hopefully, in the coming months, General Kurilla will give us some interviews in which he'll explain how this process unfolded. The transition comes at a moment when I guess next steps in the war, and when I say the war, I mean the war against Iran, are unclear. It's very obvious that Israel has achieved enormous successes in this conflict, which, when it began, it was surrounded by Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis, and Iran was orchestrating all of these elements. Remember, everyone was in fear after October 7th of a Hezbollah attack against Israel using 150,000 rockets and missiles that could hit any target in Israel. And today, Hamas has been beheaded. Hezbollah has been hollowed out completely. The Assad regime is gone, and Iran is severely weakened. We're left now with the Houthis and the ongoing conflict in Gaza. And of course, it's Gaza that's in the headlines this week because the Security Cabinet in Israel has decided on a plan to take Gaza City, which increasingly looks like it was originally. It was announced as a decision to occupy all of Gaza. Now it looks like a kind of decision between occupation, a partial occupation, and avoiding occupation, a kind of a way of putting increased pressure on Hamas to release the hostages and cut some kind of a deal. We're left, though, with the question: what defines victory in this war with Iran? The Iranians are not firing missiles on Israel right now, but they have refused to accept any of the terms that Donald Trump gave them, meaning mainly no enrichment and no building of ballistic missiles. They're going to try to rebuild their air defenses. They're going to try to rebuild their missile arsenal. And there's no obvious way to get Hamas out of Gaza yet. So we're at a moment where we can say Israel is winning, but absolute victory remains a little bit elusive.
Absolutely. Well, with regard to you referred to interviews that are expected to include by General Michael Kurilla once he's out of uniform. We had the pleasure of hosting here the former commander of CENTCOM after he left his post, so namely Kenneth McKenzie. General McKenzie was very generous in that. Hopefully, General Kurilla may also indulge us as well, and we look forward to that. General Sofrin, I'd like to hear your takes, and naturally the broad calculus of what we're seeing for the last 2 years, including from October 7th of 2023, is a war between the Islamic Republic of Iran and its proxies versus the State of Israel. On the higher level, naturally, the patron of Israel and backer, the strategic backbone of Israel, is the United States of America, as where for the Iranians, it's no other than China. Now, we do see that the Chinese are increasingly involved in preparing the Iranian regime for the next confrontation. They understand full well, as do we here in Israel, that this is not over, and the latest 12-day campaign, or rather Operation Rising Lion, was a brief exchange that brought Israel to a better position, a starting position for the next cycle, so to speak. But the Chinese are quite vigorous in those activities. What can you tell us about that? And to what degree are they being effective?
There is a new alliance that was designed over the last couple of years. It includes Russia, it includes China, it includes Iran, and it includes North Korea. Now, the Russians are very much occupied with what happens in Ukraine, and therefore they don't have the ability to support Iran. They don't have the ability to supply new weapon systems and advanced weapon systems, even though they promised to deliver a new aircraft, the Su-35, but nevertheless, nothing else happened so far, and nothing else, in addition to that, was promised to the Iranians. On the other hand, the Iranians are suffering so much damage during our attack on Rising Lion operation, have to find somebody to supply them new weapon systems, and they apply naturally to China. And just bear in mind that China was a negotiator that actually brought Iran and Saudi Arabia to the negotiating table and actually engaged those two together to get to what we call to diplomatic links and so on, and to become more friends as instead of rivals like they used to be before. So China is playing a huge role in the Middle East, and they're trying to get more influence in the Middle East, and now they have the opportunity because Iran is vigorous to have much more new weapon systems, especially anti-aircraft batteries and advanced aircrafts, because they don't have any air force at all, and they depend on China, and China is now found the opportunity to supply the weapon systems and to gain more influence in Iran and over the Middle East, of course, by supporting Iran. And this is the rationale for the ratio why they are supporting and why this engagement between those two countries is so hard, so deep. Now, bear in mind that North Korea is not supporting Iran directly, but it's supporting Russia. So we have in this, what we call these four countries that combine the new, what we call axis of evil. We have two groups. The first one is Russia and North Korea, which are working together and operating together. And North Korea is supporting Russia in its fighting in Ukraine and supplying a lot of ammunition and a lot of wind power to assist them to build their capacity. And on the other hand, the engagement between Iran and China as what we call the second part of this axis, and of course, they're getting more and more close, and of course, the Chinese will gain more influence on Iran after that.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Duran, would you like to fill in any of the blanks that are left in this specific focus?
No, I just have a couple of questions because these are what immediately comes to mind are technical questions that I personally don't have the answer to. The Chinese, my working assumption is that the Chinese will not deliver to the Iranians the top of the line systems that they have. They have the Iranians don't have the capability to defend against the Israeli systems, which are the most sophisticated in the world or among the most sophisticated. The only systems that could really, I'm talking about air defense systems here, that could really threaten the Israelis are those that are going to come from the Chinese. If I was Xi Jinping, I wouldn't want to give them my top of the line systems because only one of two things can happen if they did that. One is that those systems will be revealed to be inadequate, in which case that would be an embarrassment for China, or they would be proven to be very good, and then Israel, and through Israel, the United States would be able to study them and come up with measures to counteract them, which would weaken China with respect to the United States in the contest over Taiwan. So I don't see, for that reason, I think that it's probably the case that the Chinese will stop short of giving their top of the line systems. But they'll give something. They'll give something for sure. What will they give and what will the Iranians make of it? That seems to me to be the next stage in the game, but I don't have the capacity to understand exactly what that game is.
Very interesting. There were a couple of incidents in the South China Sea between China and the United States last week, which really illustrated the qualitative edge of the United States and its weapon systems as opposed to the Chinese. But it does bring to mind the fact that even in those type of instances, in those type of standoff situations, the Chinese do not necessarily present their most sophisticated type of munitions into the theaters to avoid having some type of detection by the United States Navy in the Pacific Fleet. And that is also something that they are very carefully operating in all theaters, to include the Middle East. So that's a very interesting point that you raised there, Dr. Duran. And I'd like to bring in General Gavish also into the conversation. You're naturally the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. You liaise together with your CENTCOM counterparts and during times of crisis, which we've experienced multiple times in the course of the past 2 years. From your perspective, how do you see the transition from General Kurilla, going back to that, since I think it's important, who was a paratrooper and grew up in the line of those infantry and ranger battalions and going up the chain of command, so to speak, as opposed to Vice Admiral Bradford Cooper, who is a Navy man, who commanded the 5th Fleet, NAVCENT, among others, has robust experience in this theater when it comes to maritime shipping, freedom of navigation, and such, and has climbed once again into the deputy commander of CENTCOM and now the commander of CENTCOM. Is that a signal that the United States has its intentions to now also focus on the issues of freedom of navigation at a time when we do see the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen, continuing to frustrate navigation through the strategic strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the adjacent waterways?
Well, Jonathan, maybe first with General Kurilla. And, when we're talking about General Kurilla, I always say that it starts with the leadership. General Kurilla is first and before anything else is a leader. And I'm sure that with the time, people will remember General Kurilla in one line with the big generals of United States. We all remember names like Schwarzkopf and others, and also, of course, during World War time, World War II, and so on. He's a great leader. First of all, his influence over his soldiers, but over the whole region, was felt very strongly during his term as the commander of CENTCOM. And I think that he have this unique capability, I would say, that from one hand, when you meet with him, the discussion could be high on the strategic level, but he is there for all the spectrum, up to the tiny details that need to be looked at and decided upon. And this is probably a combination of him being a special forces and an engineer. And he is really all over there. And when he enters the room, everyone sees him, and he's there. So this is from the one hand. From the other hand, of course, from Israel perspective, General Kurilla played a significant part in supporting Israel during the war. It is already 2 years. Of course, there were some significant events during the war itself, but we should say that the support was fabulous during all this 2 years of the war. But, even we could say that if we were talking about the decision that was made by President Trump in the past to shift from EUCOM to CENTCOM, so for sure we could say that under the leadership of General Kurilla, we all understood why. So I think that we should all be thankful to General Kurilla for what he's done for Israel. I know that also when he visited Israel 2 weeks ago, when he met with the Israeli general staff, and General Eyal Zamir was also, I think, praising what General Kurilla have done for Israel, called him a true friend of Israel, and thanked him for the success, leadership, and the cooperation, which was outstanding. Admiral Cooper, of course, he knows the region, he knows Israel. He's been around, as you said, as the deputy commander, but also during his previous terms in CENTCOM. So he knows CENTCOM very well. He knows Israel very well, and I'm confident that the cooperation between CENTCOM and the IDF and the IF and Israel overall under his command would continue to be very strong and tight. And the last thing that I would say, we have to remember, we are talking about United States, a superpower, and the commander of CENTCOM, he's really doing military diplomacy. He's talking with leaders of the countries in the Mediterranean. He's not only a commander of the forces, this is really a part of what he's doing. And I think that General Kurilla, again, did it in a very appreciated and I would say with a great success. And I'm sure that Admiral Cooper would be the same.
Well, high praise, but well-deserved indeed. I hear it across the board, not only here in Israel, but across multiple countries where they really viewed Kurilla as a leader. In Israel, we call it the Matzbi. I'm not sure what's the literal translation to that, but he was really an impressive individual, and still is, not to just render him mute. He's still very relevant to what is happening. Now, Dr. Duran, when we're looking at Iran proper, and I'd like to dive somewhat deeper there, it's a country that is facing roughly 7 hours in average of electricity cuts in recent weeks. It's facing up to 15 hours of water cuts in places like the capital, Tehran. The regime seems to be having a very hard time getting up from what Israel and the United States, as the final blow, have perpetrated, and caused them to get onto their knees. Uh, are they in a position to really prolong this exchange between the Islamic Republic and Israel at this point?
I think they are, Jonathan, because it's in their nature to oppose the West and Israel. Um, they are objectively weaker, and I would add to your list of problems they have the delegitimation of their financial system. The Israelis carried out a very sophisticated cyber attack against their banking system, both the conventional banking system and their clandestine crypto system. And the Israelis attacked the IRGC's financial assets, the individual assets of IRGC members, thereby demonstrating to the Iranian elite that they can't transfer wealth. They can't trust their own financial systems, even the covert ones, to preserve their wealth. If they want to pass on anything to their families, they're going to have to preserve their wealth in some other way, gold, or get it out of the country, or buy property, or something. So there's this deep distrust of their financial system, which I suspect hasn't completely sunk in to the leadership yet. But the Iranians are showing no sign whatsoever, the system of capitulating to Donald Trump and accepting his terms, merely on just on the question of the no enrichment. Now that the problem from the Israeli and American point of view of the Iranian nuclear program has receded significantly because the Israelis and together with the Americans destroyed enough of the capabilities of the Iranians to push them back from becoming a nuclear power. But we've yet to see any sort of political change in the attitude of the Iranians. We should never forget, deep inside the American system, in the intelligence agencies, in a lot of the national security thinking, there is a strong belief that the United States should find a way to get along with Iran. And that we people like us here in this setting, we say Israel's winning, Iran is weak. Let's put more pressure on Iran. There are voices, which we don't hear as loudly, but they have influence inside the Trump administration, who are saying now's the time to cut a deal with Iran on Iran's terms, not on our terms. So this struggle, it never ends. There's always this belief that there's some kind of little dial that at some point the Iranians will start being pragmatic rather than jihadist. I don't think they can ever stop being jihadis. This is it's in this regime. It's in the DNA of this regime. All of its legitimacy domestically, all of its legitimacy internationally is built on this notion. So they may become they will become pragmatic in the sense that they will avoid provoking the United States and provoking Israelis immediately in ways that will legitimate a massive Israeli response. But there's not a lot of appetite in the United States to do a significant military pressure against Iran. The steps that the United States needs to take to increase the economic pressure on Israel are also problematic and difficult. They're challenging because they require the United States to say pressure China at a moment when U.S.-Chinese relations are really complex for a lot of other reasons. So I expect the conflict to kind of continue to limp along the way we've become familiar with it, and the Iranians will try to buy time in order to revitalize their air defenses, and more importantly, build up their ballistic missile program again, and maybe get a larger arsenal of long-range ballistic missiles so they can shoot Israel from the eastern part of Iran, which is harder for Israel to get to than the western part. I don't see any simple solution to this in the short term.
Closing sentence from each of you, since we've come to the end of the program. General Sofrin, we'll start with you.
Okay, I said that we have to look very carefully at what happens in Lebanon. The fact that the government decided that by the end of this year, the armed forces will gather all the weapon systems from the armed groups in Lebanon, especially from Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, of course, will not give it its weapon systems. And there is a potential of clashes between the Shiites and what we call the government inside Lebanon.
General Gavish?
Well, Jonathan, we are still on the same 7 fronts that we would have to deal with. Of course, I think that there is a focus on the Gaza Strip. We've talked about it in the past, not so much during this show, but we still have to deal with this challenging front, I would say.
Thank you. Dr. Duran?
I agree. Gaza is front and center right now, and we have all this movement in France and Australia to recognize the two-state solution. Hamas is the enemy of the West. Let's defeat Hamas.
Absolutely. We can and should defeat Hamas. This is all the time that we have for today. This has been Hudson Institute's Deep Dive from Jerusalem and Washington, D.C. I'd like immediately to thank Dr. Duran, General Sofrin, and General Gavish for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a good day.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.